Hello, students. I hope you all are doing good. Today, we will discuss NCRT section 12.3 to 12.4.1 of chapter Atoms. This is the disclaimer. So, let's start by looking at what you will be able to do after this lecture. Our focus is on atoms, and by the end, you will have some specific skills and understanding. First, you will be able to understand about atomic spectra, especially the spectral lines of hydrogen. You will be able to apply Rydberg's formula, which lets us calculate the exact wavelength of each spectral line. Next, we will dive into Bohr's atomic model. You will be able to comprehend Bohr's main ideas or postulates and see how they explain why electrons stay in certain orbits. We will walk you through the math for finding the energy of an electron in a hydrogen atom and how to calculate the radius of its orbit. Firstly, we will cover NCRT section 12.3, that is atomic spectra. Next, we will move on to the Bohr's model of hydrogen atom, which is NCRT section 12.4. The Bohr model was a major step forward in understanding atomic structure. It explains how electrons move in a specific orbits around the nucleus and why atoms emit at certain wavelengths. Next, we will focus on energy levels in Bohr model, which is NCRT section 12.4.1. Let's start by looking at how atoms in a gas can absorb and release energy. We'll focus on electron excitation and photon emission, two key ideas that help explain why gases glow when energized. Here you can see a diagram showing electrons moving between energy levels in an atom. Notice how the electron drops from a higher energy level to lower energy level. As it does, it emits radiation in the form of a photon. This process is what produces the characteristic colors we see in gas discharge tubes or neon signs. Now, what happens when we excite a gas at low pressure, like in a discharge tube? When we supply energy using heat or an electric discharge, the atoms in the gas absorb this energy. This causes changes inside the atom, which we will explore step by step. First, the electrons inside the atom absorb the supplied energy and jump to higher energy levels. These higher energy levels are less stable, so the atom is now in an excited, unstable state. Think of it like climbing up a ladder. The higher you go, the more energy you have, but it's harder to stay balanced. Now, these excited electrons don't stay up for long, they quickly fall back down to their original lower state energy states. Okay, when they do, they release the extra energy as radiation, which we see as photons of light. This is the basic mechanism behind the emission of spectra of gases, and it's why each element produces its own unique set of spectral lines. Now we'll see how these emissions help us identify elements, almost like giving each one a unique barcode. Now remember that every element has its own unique arrangement of electrons and specific energy levels. This means that the possible jumps or transitions that electron can make are different for each element. As a result, each element emits light at its own set of wavelengths. Because of these unique energy transitions, atoms emit radiation only at certain wavelengths. These wavelengths match the exact energy difference between two energy levels. For example, in hydrogen, the jump from the second to the first energy level produces a specific color of light, while a different jump produces another color. The result of these specific emissions is called an emission spectrum. Instead of a continuous rainbow of colors, we see bright lines at certain positions on a dark background. Okay, so each line represents a photon of a specific energy being emitted by the atom. So importantly, the emission line spectrum is unique for every element. acting like a fingerprint. Okay, scientists use these patterns to identify elements in stars or unknown samples. Now we are going to explore how hydrogen atom produce unique patterns of light known as emission and absorption spectra. These patterns help us understand the structure of atoms and the energy changes happening inside them. Take a look at this image. It shows the emission lines in the spectrum of hydrogen. Notice how the distinct colored lines, each one represents light of a specific wavelength emitted by hydrogen atoms. We will use this figure to help us understand what's happening at the atomic level. As you can see in the figure, the spectrum emitted by atomic hydrogen consists of several bright lines. This is not a continuous rainbow, but rather a set of specific colors. Okay, so the lines that are shown in the form of bars. Okay, so that are spectral lines. Okay, let's talk about how these lines are produced. When hydrogen atoms are excited, meaning they are heated or given extra energy, they don't emit just any light. Instead, they release energy in the form of radiation at specific wavelengths. Notice that each line corresponds to a particular wavelength. This means that the hydrogen atom can only emit certain amount of energy, not just any value. These specific wavelengths are like a fingerprint for hydrogen, making its spectrum unique compared to other elements. The result of this process is a series of bright colored lines in the spectrum. Okay, each one corresponding to a specific energy transition within the hydrogen atom. No other element has exactly the same pattern of lines. So this spectrum is unique to hydrogen. Scientists use these unique patterns to identify elements in star and other distant objects. So the hydrogen spectrum is made up of several series of lines, each named after the scientist who discovered them. We will discuss these series in more detail soon. Now you can see an image showing both the absorption and emission spectra of light. Notice the dark and bright lines. These are key to understanding how atoms absorb and emit energy. Let's start with what happens when white light passes through a gas. If we analyze the light that comes out on the other side using a spectrometer, we can see which part of the spectrum have been affected by the gas. Okay, so a spectrometer is a device that separates light into its different colors or wavelengths. Some specific wavelengths of light are absorbed by the gas atoms. This means that not all colors from the white light make it through the gas. Certain ones are missing after passing through the gas. The atoms in the gas absorb only those wavelengths that match the energy needed for their electrons to jump from one energy level to another. This is unique for each element, so it's like a fingerprint. For example, hydrogen will absorb different wavelengths than sodium or helium atom. The wavelengths that are absorbed shows up as dark lines in the spectrum. These lines means that light at those specific energies didn't reach the detector because it was absorbed by the atoms. This is why the absorption spectrum look like a rainbow with black lines missing. Okay, so that black dark bands, dark lines that represent the wavelength of light that is absorbed by the atom of gas. Interestingly, the dark lines in the absorption spectra match exactly with the bright lines in the emission spectrum of the same gas when it's heated. Okay, so in emission, the atom released energy as light at those same wavelengths, producing bright lines instead of dark ones. Okay, in the case of emission spectrum, you can see in the diagram, okay, in the absorption spectrum, where there is dark lines, in the emission spectrum, there is bright lines at same places. Okay, so that bright lines are representing the emission spectrum Okay, a particular wavelength that atom is emitting when it is heated or excited through any means. So the pattern of dark lines we see is called the absorption spectrum of the gas. It's powerful tool in physics and astronomy for figuring out what elements are present in a sample just by looking at the light it absorbs. Now we are going to look at atomic spectra and why Rutherford's model of atom had some important limitations. We will see how classical physics tried to explain atomic structure and why it didn't quite work. So take a look at this diagram. It shows that electrons spiraling around the nucleus as it loses energy. Okay. And according to classical physics, if an electron is accelerating, it should emit energy as electromagnetic radiation. This means the electron would lose energy and eventually crash into the nucleus, making the atom unstable. Okay, so Rutherford atomic model pictured the atom like a miniature solar system. Okay, the nucleus is at center and electrons orbit around it, just like planets orbit the sun. In the solar system, planets are held in orbit by gravity. In the atom, electrons are held by electrostatic or Coulomb force between the negatively charged electron and positively charged nucleus. Both forces act at a distance, but one is gravitational and another is electrical. Both planets and electrons move in circles. Okay, both planets and electrons move in circles, which means they are constantly changing direction. This change in direction is called centripetal acceleration. For example, even if a planet moves at a constant speed, it's still accelerating towards the center of its orbit. The same is true for the electrons in the Rutherford model. According to classical physics, accelerating charged particle emits electromagnetic radiations. So in an atom, electrons are constantly moving in circles around the nucleus, which means they are always accelerating. Because they are charged, this acceleration should cause them to emit energy as electromagnetic radiation, just like how an antenna emits radio waves when electrons move back and forth. So now as electrons emit radiations, they lose energy continuously. This means the electrons total energy keep decreasing over time. This energy loss should make the electron spiral inward towards the nucleus. Imagine a satellite losing energy and gradually falling towards Earth. In the same way, electron orbit would shrink and it would get closer and closer to the nucleus as it keeps losing energy. So according to this theory, atoms should collapse very quickly because the electron would fall into the nucleus, but we know that atoms are stable and don't just disappear. This contradiction showed scientists that Rutherford's model couldn't be the whole story. As the electron spirals inwards, its path gets tighter and its speed changes. So the frequency at which it orbits the nucleus also changes continuously. Frequency here means the number of revolutions per second, measured in hertz. Because the electron's frequency is always changing, the light it emits should also have a continuous range of frequencies or colors. In other words, we would expect to see a continuous spectrum like a rainbow instead of specific lines. This is a direct prediction from classical physics. However, when we actually look at the light emitted by the atoms, we see only certain specific wavelengths or frequencies. These are called line spectra. For example, hydrogen emits light at very specific wavelengths, not a continuous spread. This tells us that atoms are stable and only allow certain energy transitions, which classical physics can't explain. So Rutherford model, which is based on classical ideas, can't explain why atoms are stable or why we see line spectra instead of a continuous spectrum. This was a major problem because it meant the model didn't match real world observations. These contradictions between what classical physics predicted and what experiments showed led scientists to develop quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics introduced new ideas like quantized energy levels to explain atomic stability and the observed spectra. It was Niels Bohr who realized that Rutherford's model couldn't explain why atoms emit only certain colors of light. Bohr introduced new ideas based on quantum theory, which was just starting to develop at the time. Notice that Bohr actually worked in Rutherford's lab in 1912. This close collaboration helped Bohr understand the strengths and weakness of Rutherford's model. In 1913, Bohr proposed a new atomic model that could explain the hydrogen spectrum. He combined classical physics with early quantum ideas, which was revolutionary. Highlight that this model finally explained why hydrogen emit light at specific wavelengths, something earlier models couldn't do. Bohr summarized his ideas in three main postulates or basic principles. These postulates form the foundation of his atomic model, and we will look at each one in detail next. So let's start by looking at Bohr's postulates, okay, which are fundamental ideas about how electrons behave in atoms. These postulates were proposed by Niels Bohr to explain why atoms are stable and how they emit or absorb light. So first, Bohr's postulate 1 tells us about electrons move around the nucleus in certain stable circular paths called stationary states. The key point here is that while in these orbits, electrons do not lose energy by radiation, which was a big mystery before Bohr's model. Each atom can exist in certain definite stable states. These are like fixed energy levels. The atoms can't just have any energy, it must be in one of these specific states. Another important detail is that each of these stable states has a definite total energy. That means for each stationary state, the energy of electron is fixed and doesn't change unless the electron jump to another state. This explains why atoms emit or absorb energy in specific amounts, not in a continuous range. Now let's move to Bohr postulate 2. This postulate says that electron can only orbit the nucleus in certain allowed orbits. These are the stable orbits we just talked about. For an orbit to be allowed, the electron's angular momentum must be an exact multiple of a basic unit, which is Planck's constant divided by 2 pi. Okay, or we can write it as h bar. Planck constant h has a value of about 6.6 times 10 to the power minus 34 joule seconds. This means only certain orbits are possible depending on the value of n, which is a whole number. So this leads us to the idea of quantization. The electron's angular momentum can't just be any value. It has to be one of the specific allowed values. So the electron can't gradually change its orbit. It has to jump from one allowed orbit to another. Here is the formula for the allowed angular momentum, which is L equal to NH divided by 2 pi. Okay, or L equal to N times H bar, where N is a positive integer like 1, 2, 3 and so on, and L stands for angular momentum measured in kilogram meter square per second square. Kilometer meter square per second. This formula shows us exactly which angular momentum values are possible for electrons in an atom. So according to Bohr's third postulate, electrons can jump between specific orbits, each with its own energy level. These orbits are like steps on a ladder. Electron can't exist between them, only on the steps themselves. When an electron moves from a higher energy orbit to lower one, it releases energy in the form of photon. A photon is just a particle of light. The energy of emitted photon is exactly equal to difference in energy between the two orbits. So if electron drops from an orbit with energy EI to one with energy EF, the photon carries away energy equal to EI minus EF. So let's write down the formula for energy of the emitted photon. So the formula is h nu. H nu is the energy of emitted photon. Okay, E equal to h nu. So h nu is the energy of emitted photon, which is equal to EI minus EF, where h is Planck's constant, and which is about 6.62 times 10 to the power minus 34 joule seconds. Nu is the frequency of emitted photon in hertz, and EI is the energy of initial orbit. EF is the energy of final orbit. Remember, EI must be greater than EF for emission to occur. So let's look at the mathematical development of Bohr's postulates. Bohr's model was a major step forward in understanding the structure of atoms, especially how electrons move around the nucleus. Bohr's second postulate tells us that angular momentum of an electron in an atom is quantized. That means the electron can't just have any value of angular momentum, it can have specific fixed values. The formula for quantized angular momentum is L equal to nh divided by 2 pi, where L is angular momentum, n is a positive integer called quantum number, and h is Planck's constant, which is about 6.62 times 10 to the power minus 34 joule seconds. Since angular momentum L is also equals to mvr, where m is mass of electron in kilograms, v is its speed in meter per second, and r is the radius of orbit in meters, we can set mvr equals to nh divided by 2 pi. Now let's solve for the velocity v of the electron. By rearranging the equation, we see that v equals to nh divided by 2 pi mr. This tells us the electron speed depends on quantum number n, Planck's constant h, the electron mass m, and the radius r of its orbit. Okay, so this is the formula, v equal to nh upon 2 pi mr. To summarize, we have shown how Bohr's postulate leads to specific formula for the electron velocity in its orbit. Now let's start with the formula, v equal to nh upon 2 pi mr. This equation comes from the Bohr quantization rule, which says that the angular momentum of the electron is restricted to certain values. Now let's square both sides of velocity equation to get the v squared. This helps us prepare for substitution into other formulas. Remember, when we square v, every term on the right side also gets squared. So after squaring, we get v square equal to n square h square upon 4 pi square m square r square. Next, we substitute this value of v square into another important equation, 12.3, that is r equal to e square upon 4 pi epsilon naught mv square. Here E is the charge of the electron and epsilon naught is the permittivity of free space. By plugging in our expression for v square, we can relate the radius of orbit directly to the quantum number n and other constants. So after substitution, we get a more complex expression for r, showing the radius depends upon n, h, m, e and epsilon naught. So r becomes e square 4 pi square m square r square upon 4 pi epsilon naught m n square h square. And after solving it and rearranging, it will become e square r square upon 4 pi epsilon naught n square by m multiplied by h by 2 pi whole square. So finally, after simplifying Bohr's equation, we can find the radius of the nth possible orbit for a hydrogen atom. The n here stands for the principal quantum number, which can be any positive integer 1, 2, 3 and so on. The formula for the radius of nth orbit is shown here, Rn equal to n square by m multiplied by h by 2 pi whole square multiplied by 4 pi epsilon naught upon e square. Here Rn is the radius of nth orbit, n is the orbit number, m is the mass of electron, h is Planck's constant, epsilon naught is the permittivity of free space, and e is the charge of the electron. Notice that as n increases, the radius increases with the square of n. So higher orbits are much farther from the nucleus. Now let's talk about the total energy of the electron in these stationary states. We can find this by substituting the values of orbital radius Rn into the energy equation. Okay, which is E equal to minus E square upon 8 pi epsilon naught R. Here E is the total energy in joules and negative sign shows that electron is bound to the nucleus. The closer the electron is to the nucleus, the more negative its energy. So when we substitute the value of Rn into the energy equation, we get the total energy of the electron in the nth orbit. So the final formula for the energy of electron in the nth orbit is shown here. En equals to E square minus E square upon 8 pi epsilon naught m multiplied by m upon n square multiplied by 2 pi upon h whole square and multiplied by E square upon 4 pi epsilon naught. Again, En is in joules and you can see that energy depend on 1 over n square. So as n increases, the energy becomes less negative. This explains why electrons in higher orbits have more energy. So first, let's look at the total energy of an electron in the nth orbit of a hydrogen atom. After simplifying Bohr's equation, we get a formula that tells us exactly how much energy the electron has in any orbit. So here is the energy formula. En equal to minus m e raised to power 4 upon 8 n square epsilon naught square h square. The negative sign shows that electron is bound to the nucleus. The energy is lower than if the electron were free. So now let's break down what each symbol in the formula stands for. So first, m is the mass of the electron. Its value is 9.1 times 10 to the power minus 31 kilograms. Next, E is the charge of electron, which is 1.6 times 10 to the power minus 19 coulombs. Epsilon naught, written as epsilon naught, is the permittivity of free space or vacuum. Its value is 8.85 times 10 to the power minus 12 coulomb square per Newton meter square. Finally, H is Planck's constant, which is 6.6 times 10 to the power minus 34 joule seconds. Now let's substitute all values into our energy equation. By plugging in the numbers, we can see exactly how the energy depends on the orbit number n. So substituting values in equation 12.8. So after substituting the values, we get the expanded formula for En, which is En equal to 9.1 multiplied by 10 to the power minus 31 multiplied by 1.6 times 10 to the power minus 19 whole square, raised to power 4 upon 8 multiplied by n square multiplied by 8.85 times 10 to the power minus 12 whole square multiplied by 6.6 multiplied by 10 to the power 34 whole square joule, and negative sign is representing that electron is bound to the nucleus. Okay, notice how the energy depends on n squared in the denominator. So as n increases, the energy becomes less negative, meaning the electron is less tightly bound. Here is the formula for energy of an electron in the nth orbit of hydrogen atom. En equal to minus 2.18 times 10 to the power minus 18 divided by n squared measured in joules. Mark it as 12.9 equation. So atomic energies are often given in electron volts, or we represent it as EV instead of joules. An electron volt is a much smaller unit of energy, which makes it more convenient for atomic and subatomic processes. Since 1 electron volt equals to 1.6 times 10 to the power minus 19 joule, we can rewrite the energy formula in terms of electron volts. So now substituting the values, the formula becomes En equal to minus 2.18 times 10 to the power minus 18 divided by 1.6 times 10 to the power minus 19 n square electron volts. Okay, remember 1 joule equals to 1 divided by 1.6 times 10 to the power minus 19 electron volts. This step shows the direct conversion and sets us up for a simpler expression. After simplifying, we get En equals to minus 13.6 divided by n squared in electron volts. This is a key result for hydrogen atom and mark it as equation 12.10. The negative sign in the energy means the electron is bound to the nucleus. It doesn't have enough energy to escape on its own. To free the electron, we would need to supply energy to overcome this binding. So to remove the electron completely from the hydrogen atom, we must provide energy equal to magnitude of this negative value. Moving the electron infinitely far from the nucleus, this process is called ionization, and the energy required is known as ionization energy. Now we are going to explore how Bohr's model help us understand the energy states of hydrogen atoms. We will see how electrons occupy specific orbits and how their energy changes depending on their position. Notice here that atom has its lowest energy, means the most negative value, when electron is in the orbit closest to the nucleus. This is when the principal quantum number n equals to 1. Remember, a more negative energy means a more stable, lower energy state for the electron. As we increase the value of n to 2, 3 and so on, the electron moves to orbit that are farther from the nucleus. The energy of electron becomes less negative, which means it is increasing. This shows us that electron is less tightly bound to the nucleus as it moves to the higher orbits. The ground state refers to the lowest energy state of the atom, where the electron is in the smallest possible orbit called the Bohr radius. The Bohr radius is a specific distance from the nucleus, about 5.29 times 10 to the power minus 11 meters. This is most stable arrangement for the hydrogen atom. In the ground state, when n equals 1, the total energy of the electron can be calculated. Let's look at the formula for this energy and see what it tells about the hydrogen atom. So the energy of the electron in the ground state is E1 equal to minus 13.6 electron volts. The general formula is En equal to minus 13.6 divided by n squared, where n is the orbit number. Here energy is measured in electron volt, which is a unit of energy commonly used in atomic physics. For n equal to 1, we get minus 13.6 electron volts, showing the electron is strongly bound to the nucleus. So to remove the electron completely from the ground state, we need to supply at least 13.6 electron volts of energy. This is called ionization energy of hydrogen atom. It's the minimum energy needed to free the electron from the atom. First, notice that Bohr's model accurately predicts the ionization energy of hydrogen. Ionization energy is the amount of energy needed to completely remove the electron from the atom. Now let's consider what happens at room temperature. Most hydrogen atoms are found in their lowest possible energy state, which we call the ground state. This means the electron is as close to the nucleus as it can be, and the atom is stable. But hydrogen atom can gain energy in different ways. One common way is through collisions with another electrons. When this happens, the atom absorbs energy, which can change the electron's behavior. If the hydrogen atom absorbs enough energy, the electron can move to higher energy level farther from the nucleus. This process is called excitation, and it means the atom is no longer in its ground state. When the atom is in its higher energy condition, we say it is in an excited state. Remember, excited states are temporary. Eventually, the electron will return to the ground state, often releasing energy as light. Now we are focusing on the energy associated with the excited states in atoms. This is a key idea in understanding how electrons behave in atoms, especially when they absorb or release energy. Let's start by looking at the total energy of an electron in the nth possible orbit. as given by equation 12.10. Here n is called the principal quantum number and it tells us about the orbit or energy level the electron is in. The formula for energy of the electron in the nth orbit is En equal to minus 13.6 divided by n squared with the answer in electron volts or EV. Remember, 1 electron volt is the energy gained by the electron when it moves through a potential difference of 1 volt. The negative sign shows that electron is bound to the nucleus. The energy is always less than the 0. Now let's look at the first excited state. This means the electron is in the second orbit. So n equals to 2. So we'll use the same formula to find the energy for this state. So plugging n equal to 2 into our formula, we get E2 equal to minus 13.6 divided by 4 or 2 square, which equals minus 3.4 electron volt. This means the electron in the first excited state has an energy of negative 3.4 electron volts. So how much energy does it take to move an electron from ground state to the first excited state in a hydrogen atom? We find this by subtracting the energy of the ground state from the energy of the first excited state. This difference tells us energy needed to excite the electron. Doing the calculation, E2 minus E1 is negative 3.4 minus negative 13.6, which equals 10.2 electron volt. This means it takes 10.2 electron volts to excite a hydrogen atom's electron from ground state to the first excited state. Now let's consider second excited state of the hydrogen atom. This is when the principal quantum number n equals 3. Remember, n tells us which energy level the electron is in, with n equal to 1 being the ground state. The energy for each state depends on the value of n. Here the formula for energy of the third level for or n equal to 3, E3 equals to negative 13.6 divided by 3 squared, which gives us negative 1.51 electron volts. The negative sign means the electron is still bound to the nucleus but less tightly than in the lower energy levels. So how much energy does it take to move an electron from the ground state n equal to 1 up to the second excited state n equal to 3? So we find this by subtracting the energy of the ground state from the energy of the third state. So let's do the calculation. E3 minus E1 equals to negative 1.51 minus negative 13.6, which is 12.09 electron volts. This means we need to supply 12.09 electron volts of energy to move the electron from ground state to the second excited state. Remember, E1 is the energy, E1 is negative 13.6 electron volts for hydrogen. In the same way, we can calculate the energy needed to move an electron between any two energy levels in the atom. Just subtract the lower energy from the higher one. Okay. This method works for all transitions in hydrogen. Now take a look at this diagram. This is the energy level diagram for a hydrogen atom. Okay. Notice the horizontal lines. Each one represents an allowed energy state for the electron. At room temperature, the electron usually stays in the lowest energy state called the ground state. Okay. To remove the electron completely from the atom or ionize it, we need to supply 13.6 electron volt of energy for hydrogen atom. Okay, this value is specific to the hydrogen and shows how much energy is needed to overcome the attraction between the electron and nucleus. So let's discuss what happens when an electron moves between these energy levels. When an electron drops from a higher energy state to a lower one, it releases energy as a photon, which is a particle of light. The amount of energy released matches the difference between the two energy levels. So now what happens as an electron moves to higher energy levels, which means larger value of n, the minimum energy needed to remove or free the electron from the atom actually gets smaller as n increases. In other words, the farther the atom is from the nucleus, the less energy it takes to pull it away completely. For example, if electron is in the first energy level, it takes a lot of energy to remove it. But if it is already in the higher level, like n equal to 3 or 4, which so much less energy is needed to remove the electron from the atom. So the diagram shows the stationary states of hydrogen atom, which are specific energy levels where the electron can exist without radiating energy. These energy levels are calculated using a formula equation 12.10, which gives us the energy for each state. Each of these stationary states is labeled with the principal quantum number n, which tells us the order of energy levels. The lowest energy state is n equal to 1, called the ground state, and higher values of n represent excited states. As n increases, the energy levels get closer together. Remember, the principal quantum number is always a whole number starting from 1. The maximum energy state occurs when the principal quantum number n becomes infinity. In this case, the total energy of the electron is 0. Okay, or 0 electron volts. This means the electron is no longer bound to the nucleus at all. At this maximum energy state of 0 electron volt, the electron is completely separated from the nucleus and is stationary. In other words, the atom is ionized and electron is free. As we look at the principal quantum number, which we call n, remember that n tells us which energy level an electron is in. For example, n equal to 1 is the ground state, n equal to 2 is the first excited state, and so on. As n increases, electron is farther from the nucleus and has more energy. Notice how the energy gaps between these higher energy levels become smaller as n increases. That means the difference in energy between, say, n equal to 3 and n equal to 4 is less than the difference between n equal to 1 and n equal to 2. Okay, this is important because it affects the wavelength of light that atoms can absorb or emit. For example, the energy gap between the first excited state n equal to 2 and the second excited state n equal to 3 is smaller than the gap between ground state n equal to 1 and the first excited state n equal to 2. This pattern continues as n increases. Remember, these decreasing gaps explain why the lines in atomic spectra get closer together at higher energies. Now let's summarize what we have studied today. So let's start by looking at atomic spectra. This is a key concept in understanding how atoms interact with light. Atomic spectra are unique patterns of light emitted or absorbed by atoms, and they help us identify different elements. Now notice that when atoms are excited, meaning their electrons have absorbed energy, they emit light at specific wavelengths. This creates what we call line spectra, which look like distinct colored lines rather than a continuous rainbow. Each element has its own unique set of lines, almost like a fingerprint. Let's focus on hydrogen as an example. The hydrogen spectrum is famous for having three main series of lines: the Lyman series in the ultraviolet region, the Balmer series in the visible region, and Paschen series in the infrared region. Other two series are always also there, Brackett series and P1 series. Each series appear in different part of electromagnetic spectrum. Each of these series actually represent electrons moving or transitioning between specific energy levels in the atoms. For example, the Balmer series happens when electron fall to the second energy level, while the Lyman series involve transition to the first energy levels from the higher energy levels. So let's start by looking at Bohr's model of atom now. So first, Niels Bohr in 1913 combined ideas from classical physics and new quantum concepts to explain the hydrogen atom spectrum. This means he used both old and new science to figure out why hydrogen gives off certain colors of light. Next, Bohr proposed the electrons move in a fixed circular orbits around the nucleus, which he called stationary states. In these orbits, electrons do not lose energy by radiation, which was a surprising idea at that time. Bohr also said that angular momentum of the electron in these orbits is quantized. That means it can only have certain specific values, not just any value. This formula is L equal to NH divided by 2 pi or NH bar, where L is angular momentum in kilogram meter square per second, N is positive integer called quantum number, and H is Planck's constant. So only certain orbits are allowed. Energy is only emitted or absorbed when an electron jumps from one allowed orbit to another. This is called a transition. The energy difference between the orbits determine the color of light we see in the hydrogen spectrum. The radius of each orbit is given by the formula Rn equal to n squared times a naught. Okay, here Rn is the radius in meters, n is the orbit number, and a naught is the Bohr radius, which is about 0.529 times 10 to the power minus 10 meters. Okay, for example, the first orbit has the radius of 0.529 times 10 to the power minus 10 meters, and the second orbit is 4 times larger. The energy of each level is given by En equal to minus 13.6 divided by n squared measured in electron volts. En is the energy, n is the orbit number. For example, for n equal to 1, the energy is minus 13.6 electron volts, and for n equal to 2, it's minus 3.4 electron volts. Notice how the energy gets less negative as n increases. The lowest energy level, called the ground state, has an energy of minus 13.6 electron volts. This is the most stable state for the electron in the hydrogen atom. Finally, the ionization energy of hydrogen atom is 13.6 electron volts. This is the minimum energy needed to remove the electron completely from the atom, starting from the ground state. So if you give the electron 13.6 electron volts, it escapes the atom and the hydrogen atom becomes ionized. So there are some practice questions based on today's topic. So the energy level refers to the specific amount of energy an electron has when it occupies a certain orbit or shell around the nucleus. For hydrogen, these levels are labeled by a principal quantum number n, where n is 1, 2, 3 and so on. We will begin by finding the energy when the electron is in the n equal to 3 state. Now let's find the radius of second orbit, which means n equal to 2 in terms of Bohr radius a naught. The Bohr radius is the fundamental constant that represents the smallest possible orbit for an electron in hydrogen, about 5.29 times 10 to the power minus 11 meters. Next, let's calculate the frequency of light emitted with an electron when an electron drops from n equal to 4 to n equal to 2 in an hydrogen atom. When an electron moves to a lower energy level, it releases energy as light. The energy difference between these levels determine the frequency of an emitted light. Finally, let's determine the energy needed to ionize a hydrogen atom from the first excited state, which is n equal to 2. Ionization means removing the electron completely from the atom. We will continue the energy difference between the n equal to 2 times n equal to 2 level and the point where the electron is free, which is defined as zero energy. This value will be in electron volts, a common unit for atomic energies. So this is all about today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed the session. So thank you for your attention.